Make everyday life accessible.
It happens to be that today is National Backwards Day, so besides the fun of walking in and out of the house backwards and that kind of thing, we thought it'd be a good time also to focus on our brains and what it might do sometimes if your brain is working backwards for a while. The person to talk to about that is none other than Michelle Hecker-Davis, who has Learning RX over in East Brainerd. Good to see you this morning.
Hello, good morning.
So not surprising to me, you're going to tell me that it makes a lot of sense and can be very helpful for your brain to be challenged sometimes with some backwards things.
Absolutely. Humans are so cool, which means that we really make patterns and do things purposefully in a routine. And what we know about the brain is that actually changing that routine can foster what's called neuroplasticity, which means the brain can change and rewire. So when you really think about applying that to something even as simple as, making a happiness pattern, when you want to run away from something, do the opposite, face it. And there's a lot of research that shows that that can actually cause growth and improvement in the way that your brain is working.
Okay, so the basic thing I would think of on a day like this for the opposite would be if I'm right-handed, try writing with my left hand, which is no easy task. It can be beneficial though, you say.
Yeah, absolutely. Another one that I love is brushing your teeth with the opposite hand, because that's something you do every day. If you're right-handed or if you're left-handed, try with the opposite. And it's an extra challenge. Writing absolutely is another thing we commonly do with one hand over the other. So if you try and just do the opposite of that, you're actually going to be training your brain and making a new connection.
Does it work differently for different people, but is part of the idea that by keeping your brain elasticized, does that keep us from getting into a rut or only seeing the world in one way? Does it make us more open-minded?
Yes, and something that's really interesting in the world I work in, which is cognitive skills. So those are skills like memory and attention and processing speed. And we have a natural decline that our brain goes in. So you start to notice when you cross over probably the 50, 60 threshold, and that's not the same for everyone, because how deep into patterns are you, or how much do you do something new? If you're learning a language or learning an instrument or doing things new, you're going to be actually elongating the time of that decline for those cognitive skills. And, I hear all the time, oh, well, I love to do Sudoku, so I do Sudoku every day. And that's great. But if you do it every day, that's your pattern. So you need to actually break the pattern and do a different kind of puzzle. Or the same thing with crosswords. If you've done a crossword every day, you want to do something different to actually create change.
Interesting. And does that mean, real quickly, if you do things in the same order every day, that would be a guilt of a problem with me, maybe switch it up a bit, otherwise I get kind of OCD about things?
Yes, and another one I love is following in GPS or directions. When you think about, you take the same way to get somewhere every time, and I see more people who have been driving that place for years, but they're going to turn on their GPS, and so I encourage people to not rely on that GPS as much and use your visual processing and use your memory to try to get somewhere or navigate through a different direction based on the north, south, east, west. Where are we and how can we get there? And that's another way to challenge yourself that you do on a daily basis. Is really it's about breaking patterns.
Okay.
Growth.
What about on an academic side of things, dyslexia? We think about that as being people seeing things flipped. Is that the correct interpretation, or do we have that wrong?
It's a very common misconception that dyslexia is all about reversing or seeing something backwards. And where you do commonly have reversals with dyslexia, actually 80% of those folks with dyslexia have an issue with phonemic awareness, which has to do with how our brain is processing or analyzing sounds. So blending sounds together or breaking sounds apart, that's what our brain is doing. So you might see the letter C and say k, and the letter A and say ah, and the letter T and say t, and then what is that together? Back, which is the complete opposite. So it's more when you're blending those sounds together rather than how you're actually seeing it. It's really fascinating.
Okay, so at LearningRx, before I let you go, for anybody thinking, you know what, she's going to be the one who can help not only your child, you work with adults too, don't you?
Absolutely. And we have more adults right now with dyslexia than we ever have before, because it's something that typically, you find compensations for, you find ways to work around. But if you're regularly not able to pronounce new words, if you have difficulty with similarities or differences in words like no and on, or sound discrimination, or especially low reading comprehension. I speak to so many adults with dyslexia who just hate reading and avoid it, but when they do read, they have to read it over and over and over. And that's something that you can actually rewire in your brain. It's a big part of what
I only have a minute left, but when people come to see you, are your consultations at no charge?
Yes, so we do free consultations just to discuss and determine what ideas there might be for you. But we also can provide testing to really measure your key cognitive areas and understand where your strengths and weaknesses are. And with those, we individually look at every client we work with. So we don't have, a sort of one size fits all scenario. We really target, your particular areas.
I think it is a fascinating conversation. How many people might go home and have breakfast for supper? That's an opposite.
Love it. Great idea.
Or just have fun walking around backwards in the house with their kids. I'll try the brushing my teeth thing tonight, Michelle. That's a pretty good one too.
That's a good one.
All right. Thanks so much as always.
Thank you, Julie.
You can find her and the entire team at LearningRx right there on Hamilton Place Boulevard. They're in the same complex where Marshall's and Bed Bath & Beyond is. 305-1599 is their phone number. Online, it's learningrx.com.
For 4